Don't you lose sight of what you want.
Greetings fellow captains and welcome back to another episode of World of Warships Legends with the Hivehound, and today we are going to be looking at the tier 6 premium American cruiser USS Indianapolis, also known as CA-35. I don't currently own this ship. I have the Atlanta, I have the Boise, and I'm debating it because it has actually just gone on sale for 12,000 doubloons. So for anyone who hasn't picked up the ship yet and you are a fan of the American cruiser line, it's definitely worth thinking about. It is a Portland class cruiser, so it's essentially the sister ship to the tier 6. Ooh, wow, absolute brain fart there. Tier 6 New Orleans that is currently in the line, but obviously you get the advantages of the XP bonus per match, and it also makes a lot more money, and it's a pretty beautiful ship. So yeah, we'll see. I might pick it up over the next week or two whilst it's on sale before the obviously with all the other new cruisers, the Molotov, particularly at tier 5. We'll see what happens. But I figured this ship was definitely deserves a video, particularly because of its rather interesting history. So we're going to have a bit of a look around the ship, have a bit of a chat about how Chris has set the ship up here. And when we'll go into some gameplay then, with the gameplay in the background, we'll look at we'll discuss the interesting history. So we'll start the history now anyway. So CA-35, also known as USS Indianapolis, was the second of the Portland cruiser class ships named after Indianapolis, the town of Indianapolis, obviously. In Indiana in America, and as you can see, Chris has it equipped with a maxed out rank 16 legendary rank 4 commander with Norman Scott, so he really does like his American cruisers quite a lot. And we can see, so talk about the ship in general. So it's quite agile, so that means it's nimble, it's maneuverable. You can swing the ship around quite quickly. We have sure shot, so it's pretty accurate, and so you're gonna get as all of the American cruisers, they're extremely accurate. From its 3 turrets with its 3 guns in each, so the 9 rounds, and as you can see, the maneuverability, the rudder shift time's very low, making it pretty nimble and agile, and it's got reasonably good concealment as well. You don't want to go brawling in it because its armor isn't the best, but you want to use it as a kiting away boat. So with that rough introduction done, like I said, unfortunately I don't own the ship, so I had to rely on other footage, but we'll get on with it. So had a pretty extensive career. It began World War II in the New Guinea campaign, where she was in the task force of the South Pacific in Rubenil of New Britain, escorting the aircraft carrier Lexington. The American ships were attacked by 18 Japanese aircraft. 16 of these were shot down by aircraft from the Lexington, and the other aircraft was destroyed by anti-aircraft fire from the ship. On March the 10th, task force reinforced with the US carrier Yorktown attacked Lau and Saluma, probably pronouncing that wrong, in New Guinea, where the Japanese were marshalling amphibious forces and attacking the south through Owen Stanley mountain range The US Air Force surprised and inflicted heavy damage on the Japanese warships and transports, losing a few aircraft. Indianapolis returned to the Mare Island Naval Shipyard for a refit before escorting a convoy to Australia. It then went on to work in the Atalunya Island campaign. They headed to the North Pacific to support American units for the Battle of Alatoona Island. On the 7th of August, Indianapolis and the task force attacked Kiska Island, a Japanese staging area. Although fog hindered observations, Indianapolis and the other ships fired their main guns into the bay. Floor planes from the cruisers reported Japanese ships were sunk in the harbour and damage to shore installations. About 15 minutes into the battle, the Japanese shore batteries began to return fire, but it wasn't long before they were destroyed by the Indianapolis and its other the other ships in the flotilla, destroying them with their main guns. Japanese did attempt to approach with submarines, which were destroyed by depth charges from American destroyers, and the Japanese seaplanes made ineffective bombing attacks. In spite of lack of information on the Japanese forces, the operation was considered a success, and the US forces later occupied Attica Island as well, providing the naval base further from Dutch Harbour in the Unalaska Island. Right, so we'll skip the rest. She was in very many battles, but it is all about her secret mission. So after some repairs and a major overhaul, Indianapolis received orders to undertake a top secret mission of the utmost significance of national security. They were to proceed to Tinnan Island carrying enriched uranium, about half the world's supply of uranium-235 at the time, and other parts that were required for the assembly of the atomic bomb codenamed Little Boy, which would be dropped on Hiroshima a few weeks later. So the Indianapolis departed from San Francisco's Hunters Point Naval Shipyard with its valuable cargo on the 16th of July in 1945. Within hours of Trinity's test, she set a speed record of 74.5 hours from San Francisco to Pearl Harbor, averaging 29 knots or 33 miles an hour or 54 kilometers per hour, depending on where in the world you are. Arriving in Pearl Harbor on the 19th of July, she raced on unaccompanied, delivering the atomic bomb components to Tinton on the 26th of July. Indianapolis was then sent to Guam, where a number of her crew had completed their tours and were replaced by other sailors, and leaving Guam on the 28th of July, where the American forces still have a naval base today. She began sailing towards Leyte, where her crew were to receive training before continuing on to Yokohama to join Vice Admiral Jesse B. Odenloff's Task Force 95. At 15 minutes past midnight on July the 30th, the Indianapolis was struck on her starboard side by two Type 95 torpedoes, one on the bow and one midships, from Japanese submarine I-58, captained and commanded by Commander Hashimoto, who initially thought he had spotted the New Mexico-class battleship Idaho. The explosions caused massive damage, and the Indianapolis took a heavy list. The ship had a great deal of armament and gunfire directors added as the war went on, and therefore she was quite top-heavy at this time. 12 minutes later, she rolled over completely, and then her stern rose in the air as she plunged down. Some 300 of the 1,195 crewmen aboard went down with the ship, with few lifeboats and many without life jackets. The remainder of the crew were set adrift. And the Navy command did not know of the ship sinking until survivors were spotted in the open ocean 3.5 days later at 25 minutes past 10 on the 2nd of August by a PV-1 flown by Lieutenant Wilbur Chuck Gwynn and his co-pilot Lieutenant Warren Colwell, as well as a PBY-2 pilot spotted them, piloted by Bill Kitchen, while on a routine patrol flight. Gwynn immediately dropped a life raft and a radio transmitter. All the air and surface units capable of rescue operations were dispatched to the scene at once. First to arrive was the amphibious PYB-5A Catalina plane, flown by Lieutenant Commander Robert Adrian Marks. Marks and his flight crew spotted the survivor and dropped the life rafts. One raft was destroyed by the drop, while the others were too far away from the exhausted crew. Again, standing orders not to land the plane in open ocean, Marks took a vote from his crew and decided to land the aircraft in 12-foot swells. He was also able to maneuver his craft to pick up 56 survivors. Space in the plane was limited, so Marks had men lashed to the wings with parachute cords. His actions rendered the aircraft unflyable, and after nightfall, the destroyer escort USS Cecil J. Doyle, the first of the 7 rescue ships, used a searchlight and beacon and instilled hope in all of those that were still in the water. And 6 other ships picked up the remaining survivors. After the rescue, Marks's plane was sunk by Cecil J. Doyle, as it was not able to be recovered. Many of the survivors were injured and all suffered from lack of food or water, leading to dehydration, hypothermia, some food rations such as spam and crackers amongst the debris of the Indianapolis, exposed to the elements as well. And they also suffered from shark attacks. While some killed themselves or other survivors in various states of delirium and hallucination, only 316 of the nearly 900 men set adrift after the sinking survived. 2 of the rescued survivors, Robert Lee Shipman and Frederick Harrison, died later in August in 1945. Ocean Fear, the 2007 episode of the Discovery Channel documentary series Shark Week, states the sinking of the Indianapolis resulted in the most shark attacks on humans in history, and attributed the attacks to ocean white-tip shark species. Tiger sharks may also have killed some of the sailors. The same show attributed the most deaths on the Indianapolis to exposure, salt poisoning, and thirst, with the dead being dragged off by the sharks. So, the headquarters of Command Marines on Guam and of the commander of the Philippine Sea Frontier on Leyte kept operation plotting boards on which they plotted the position of all vessels in which headquarters were concerned. However, it was assumed that large ships, ship as large as the Indianapolis, would reach their destination on time unless otherwise reported. Therefore, their positions were based on predictions and not on reports. On the 31st of July, when she should have arrived in Leyte, Indianapolis was removed from the board of the headquarters, and she was recorded as of having arrived by the headquarters of Commander Philip C. Frontiers. Lieutenant Stuart B. Gibson, the operations officer under Port Director Talcaban, was the officer responsible for tracking the movements of the Indianapolis. The vessel's failure to arrive on schedule was known at once to Gibson, who failed to investigate the matter and made no immediate report of the fact to his supervisors. Gibson received a letter of reprimand in connection with the incident, and the acting commander of operations, officer of the Philippine Sea Frontier, also received a reprimand, while Gibson's immediate superior received a letter of admonition. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I'll have to check that. The first official statement for the Navy said distress calls were keyed by radio officers and possibly were actually transmitted, but no evidence had been developed that any distress message from the ship was received by any other ship, aircraft or shore station. Declassified records later showed that 3 stations received the signal, but none acted upon the call. One commander was drunk, another had ordered his men not to disturb him, and the third thought it was a Japanese trap. Immediately prior to the attack, the seas had been moderate, visibility fluctuating but poor in general, and the Indianapolis had been steaming along at 17 knots. When she failed to reach Letty on the 31st of July as scheduled, no report was made that she was overdue. This omission was due to a misunderstanding of the movement reporting system. Captain Charles B. McAvee, who was the commander of the Indianapolis since November 1944 and through several battles, survived the sinking. Though he was one of the last to abandon ship, he was among those rescued days later. In November 1945, he was court-martialed for 2 charges: failing to order his men to abandon ship and hazarding the ship. Cleared of these charges of failing to order the abandoned ship, McVeigh was convicted of hazarding the ship by failing to zigzag. Several aspects of the court-martial were controversial. There was evidence that the Navy itself had placed the ship in harm's way, and McVeigh's orders were to zigzag at his discretion, weather permitting. However, McVeigh was not informed that Japanese submarines were operating in the vicinity of his route from Guam to Lafayette. Further, Commander Hashimoto, the gentleman commanding the I-58, testified that zigzagging would have made no difference. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz remitted McVeigh's sentence and restored him to active duty. McVeigh retired in 1949 as a Rear Admiral. While many of the Indianapolis survivors say McVeigh was not to blame for the sinking, the family of some of the men who died thought otherwise. Merry Christmas, our family holidays will be a lot merrier if you hadn't killed my son, read one piece of mail. The guilt was then placed on his shoulders and mounted until he committed suicide in 1968 using his Navy-issued revolver. McVeigh was discovered on the front lawn of his garden with a toy soldier in one hand and the revolver in the other. He was 70 years old. In 1996, 6th grade student Hunter Scott began his research on the sinking of the Indianapolis for a class project. Scott's efforts led to an increase in national publicity, which got the attention of retired congressional lobbyist named Michael Monroe, who had been scheduled to be assigned to the Indy before she set sail on her final voyage. Around the same time, Captain William J. Toty of the United States Navy, final commanding officer of the fast attack submarine USS Indianapolis, received an appeal from several of the Indianapolis survivors to assist in an exoneration effort. Toty then demonstrated throughout the analysis of the tactic of zigzagging would not have spared the Indianapolis from at least one of the torpedo hits by the I-58, and authorized an article published in the U.S. Navy Institution's Proceedings magazine in October of 1999. the sinking of the Indianapolis and the responsibility of the commander. Meanwhile, Monroney, whose son-in-law was staff of Senator Bob Smith, brought this matter to the attention of his son-in-law, who was able to get the issues in front of Smith. Smith convinced Senator John Warner to hold a hearing in the Senate Armed Service Committee on the 14th of September 1999, in which several of the Indianapolis survivors testified. Also called to testify to the hearing was Vice Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Donald Pilling, Director of Naval History Center Dr. William Dudley, and Judge Advocate of the U.S. Navy Rear Admiral John Huston. The hearings were reported to sway Senator Warren into allowing a sense of Congression resolution clearing Captain McVeigh's name to be passed to the full Congress for a vote. In October 2000, United States Congress passed the resolution that Captain McVeigh's record should state that he is exonerated for the loss of the Indianapolis. President Bill Clinton signed the resolution, and the resolution noted that although several hundred ships of the United States Navy were lost during combat in World War II, McVeigh was the only captain to be court-martialed for the sinking of his ship. In July 2001, United States Secretary of the Navy Gordon England directed Captain Toti to enter the congressional language into McVeigh's official Navy service records, clearing him of all wrongdoing. So that was the part of the story of the USS Indianapolis. It's been quite a long video, and one of being British, we don't particularly know a lot about the American side of the war, much like the catastrophe that hit the Arizona. But the Indianapolis is it's a pretty horrific disaster, and as much as we love playing these games and sinking each other in our ships, the history that's steeped in them, I think really deserves a voice, and people really should be aware. From 1,195 of the crew, only 300 survive, and to survive through such horrific conditions. There's not a lot I can really say much more about that. But thank you very much for sticking with us, guys. I do hope you enjoyed me rabbiting on about the history a little bit incoherently. But thank you very much, and until next time, take care.